Good morning. Well, suit up for Geneva, but keep your eyes on the Gulf. Today we examine a world caught between a diplomatic plow and a military hammer. In Geneva, mediators are reporting significant progress as Iran floats a radical new offer, a 3 to 5 year nuclear freeze and a 1.5% enrichment cap. It sounds like a breakthrough until you look at the horizon. President Trump has orchestrated the largest military buildup in the Middle East since 2003, warning that if Geneva fails, bad things will happen. Beyond the nuclear standoff, we are witnessing a global realignment. In Canada, Prime Minister Mark Carney is in Mumbai attempting to total reset of relations with India. Meanwhile, in the UK, the Labour Party is reeling from a humiliating third-place finish in a safe Manchester seat, a sign that the political centre is fracturing. I'm Mona Musarhi, and this is In Focus. Oman's foreign minister describes the talks as creative and positive. Iran's proposal to suspend enrichment and join a regional nuclear consortium is a massive tactical shift. However, U.S. Treasury just slapped new sanctions on Iranian oil, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio is refusing to move until Iran puts its ballistic missiles on the table, something Tehran calls a big lie. Well, welcome back to a short break, and we'll come back for our interview. Well, for more analysis, we're joined from Washington by Ms. Ginger Chapman, lawyer and political analyst. Good morning, Ms. Chapman, or when I say good afternoon, there are differences in our timing, but let me ask you. Oman is calling this significant progress. In your experience, does this phrase usually signal a real deal, or is it a diplomatic smoke screen just to buy time while military assets move into position?
Yes. Well, first, Ms. Mona, it's always an honor to be with you any time of the day or evening. And actually, yes, the statement by the Foreign Minister of Oman that this is significant progress, it does indicate significant progress. Wherever there is negotiations, there is always progress. And as long as the negotiations are ongoing, we know that March 2nd, there will be further negotiations in Vienna, which is a very appropriate venue, as that is where the JCPOA was signed in July of 2015. So that location has some significance, as well as being a neutral venue. And the ongoing discussions in Geneva are a positive sign. There is so much momentum against negotiations that as long as they are ongoing, there is a path forward. And one of the things that we do see with the negotiations is that, Trump, J.D. Vance, Vice President Vance, and Trump have indicated that they prefer a diplomatic solution and that the military is there as leverage. However, we do know from past experience, Operation Spiderweb, Operation Midnight Hammer, Doha, that Sometimes the Trump administration uses negotiations as a cover for strikes. On the other hand, um, there is so much pressure internally against Trump, not just the midterms, not just voter anger, but even we saw last weekend the story leaked to the Washington Post from Chief of Staff Dan Kane that he had advised the president in meetings that the United States does not have the military reserves or stockpiles for a protracted campaign against Iran,
Hmm.
and and that he had further advised that limited strikes would not actually carry out our objectives. So, at this point, it does seem that, in spite of the shortcomings of Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, their background as land developers, real estate dealers, as opposed to seasoned diplomats, we see that even Witkoff had said that Trump was perplexed and confused as to why the negotiations hadn't resulted in Iran capitulating. And even the self-awareness there to look askance at his own negotiating and explaining skills, in addition to the subject matter of the negotiations, our shifting goalposts, the increasingly onerous and sovereign eroding demands, our not even being able to to what our end is would be, whether it's the lifting of economic sanctions, the relieving of severe economic measures, whether it's just withdrawing our armada and the threat of military action. So it does seem that not just for Iran, but also for the Trump administration, as long as these talks are ongoing, that is significant progress.
If I may ask you here, on the other hand, Tehran is proposing a 1.5% enrichment limit for medical research. From a strategic standpoint, is this a viable baseline for the IAEA inspectors, or has Iran already crossed the scientific Rubicon where enrichment levels are no longer um, a matter?
Well, this is one of those technical issues that hopefully interposing the IAEA, even in spite of Dirassi's previous intelligence gathering and betrayal of Iran by providing the names and locations of scientists, which Israel then assassinated, as a prelude to their strikes on Iran last summer. We saw how that turned out. And here we are again. But the percentage of uranium enrichment, 1%, 3.67%, 20%. One of the things that makes this complicated is Iran does have the sovereign right to enrich uranium for scientific, medical, civilian, peaceful purposes. And the United States' insistence on no nuclear enrichment at all, Israel's new demand for complete dismantling of the centrifuges and all equipment associated therewith. Um, this could be another example of shifting goalposts, but this is where the technical advice of seasoned experts in these matters at the IAEA can shed some light, can actually negotiate these issues. And really, it seems that for the Trump administration, going from the nuclear weapons to no enrichment, to um, even some flexibility on the enrichment. We have seen Iran has been very flexible. A great example of this is Trump said in his State of the Union speech, we want to hear those secret words. We will never develop a nuclear bomb. And this is exactly what Iran had indicated. I believe it was Foreign Minister Araghchi. I'm not certain exactly who had indicated on their own social media posts that Iran is not
Mm.
pursuing a nuclear weapon, much as our own intelligence agencies have been saying since 2003. So, in spite of all of these obstacles, which really have to do with the United States once again shifting our own demands, increasing the demands, and really Trump again, once again, he's getting you know, one set of advice, which is more recent from our generals, as we are more closely examining the logistical situation, the range of missiles. Our tomahawks on our destroyers have about 1,000
And
mile
that's
range.
mhm. And that's another point you pinpointed on. Now, Secretary Rubio insists that ballistic missiles be part of the deal. So, is it realistic to expect any nation to negotiate while 50 US fighter jets um, are really being deployed to their doorsteps? Is it realistic?
And you might mention fighter jets with plumbing problems, as the world has found out about the USS Gerald Ford, which makes it no less formidable, but that is a sign that our military resources are exhausted. Our ships need dry dock and maintenance. Our naval seamen, our soldiers need a break. And indeed, we have seen from Venezuela to the Gulf of Aden, the Gulf of Oman, that we are deploying our massive armada, but it is becoming less effective, not just because of Trump's bluster, but also, as you noted, Iran. No nation would trade away their sovereign rights, would give up what we cannot seem to accomplish on the battlefield. So to just capitulate when Iran is in a greater position of strength than they were a year ago, and the United States, even though we are militarily powerful, we do not know what our end objective is, or negotiated, or even a military path with clear, specific steps to carry out that objective. A great example is the logistics. Once again, our ships have to stay at least 1,000 miles offshore to stay out of range of Iranian defensive missiles, at the same time that that maxes out the range on our missiles, which is leading our generals to assume that we will have to rely on our Air Force. Our B-52s, they can fly high enough, but here's the thing, because of the distances involved, because our Gulf partners will not let us use their airspace, same with some of our European partners, as we've seen from the UK, our fighter jets, in order to get close to the targets deep in Iran to accomplish their goal, would have to refuel in the air over Iran, which makes them targets. So once again, dealing with the actual logistics, the facts on the ground, the facts in the air, is why our generals are now saying to Trump, we need to step back and rely more on diplomatic engagement rather than military leverage while we figure this out. At the same time that we see that Israel is, they would love nothing more than the United States to get in a protracted war with Iran. Indeed, there's word that they have been threatening to strike Iran first,
Right.
which for Trump would be almost a relief. In fact, we've heard that Trump is hoping that if Israel does strike Iran, that in itself would provoke Iran to strike
Yes.
American bases. This would give Trump a reason to then
Right.
galvanize the American people to support the
Right.
war, which the American people are now 70–80% opposed to the war. Trump is risking the midterms, his
Right.
presidency. So once again, if he does get dragged into the war, which Israel is threatening to do, not just risks to the
Right.
presidency, but the regional escalation, global escalation,
Right.
energy recession.
Well, Ms. Chapman, please stay with us as we turn to our second segment, and we are moving from the diplomatic thought to the cold reality of war aims. Now, if Geneva fails, what comes next? President Trump has been vague about his ultimate goal. So is it the Maduro model, decapitating the leadership in hopes of a more pliable leader who could emerge? Or is it a total destruction of the IRGC's economic and military stranglehold? With no ground troops on the horizon, Washington seems to be gambling that air power alone can achieve ambitious political results. But as history shows, bombing can pulverize infrastructure, but it rarely erases nations' will. Right, back to you, Ms. Chapman. And analysts are suggesting the US might try to remove the supreme leader, given the IRGC's deep roots in the Iranian economy. Is it possible to decapitate this regime without triggering a total state collapse?
Well, this is certainly something the Trump administration has contemplated. However, Iran is not Venezuela. Tehran is 750 miles inland. Caracas in Venezuela was right along the coast. We were able to fly helicopters in, a couple hundred men. We had bribed people ashore first who were dissatisfied with Maduro. And that was a very different operation. However, it appears that the Trump administration is intoxicated off the success of Venezuela, and that may have been initially how they approached Iran to take out the supreme leader. We saw initially the Trump administration was saying he should leave the country, he could go to another country and retire, which was how they began their overtures with President Maduro. However, once again, logistically, it became apparent Iran is the size of Western Europe. It's 4 times larger than Iraq. So we cannot just fly our Chinook helicopters ashore and snatch the supreme leader from his home the way we did President Maduro. And indeed, talk quickly turned to, well, how can we topple the regime? We saw last December when Netanyahu flew to Mar-a-Lago or DC, that apparently that was when they had discussed getting the rioters to start to protest. And indeed, what they did was they hijacked the original economic protests, which were a genuine nonviolent response to America crashing their currency, as our Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said in an interview last December. We crashed the real, we crashed their currency in order to increase the economic pain on the people, in addition to our sanctions, the snapback sanctions, to get the people to rise up. And that's what happened. And that's when, we saw the protests became out of hand. There were infiltrators, interlopers. Even Turkey alerted Iran to a group of hundreds of fighters being sent by our CIA from some part of Syria. This was thwarted.
Right.
We saw Mike Pompeo bragging that Mossad was there.
Right. Ms. Chapman, as you said respectively, reports suggested that the U.S. is low on air defense munitions due to the war in Ukraine. Now, can the U.S. effectively protect its regional allies from an Iranian counterstrike if its own stockpiles were depleting?
Well, first we saw that during the war between Israel and Iran last year,
Mm,
that the United States used 25% of our THAADs, our terminal high altitude air defense missiles, just protecting Israel, and that Israel was about to go under. That's why they asked Trump to demand a ceasefire with Iran or to ask for a ceasefire. Excuse me. Um, and we are pinned down in Ukraine, even though Trump says he wants to walk away. He appears to be abandoning NATO and our European allies. At the same time, we're still continuing to supply Ukraine with weapons, with intelligence and surveillance. Indeed, as it turns out in the news, we recently heard that American and Danish pilots have been contracting there to fly Ukrainian planes that NATO has given them on their basically we're now flying their planes for them. So yes,
mm,
we are pinned down in Ukraine. They are still consuming a great deal of our weapons, apparently not enough of our air defense missiles to protect Ukraine. However, how many air defense missiles do we have left after last summer? Our generals are saying once
mm,
again, only a couple weeks. A protracted war, once again, would not lead to success to the United States. It would just be a protracted, another endless war with no success in sight, just a slow grind. Israel would love this. This would wear down Ukrainian reserves, Iranian reserves. This would wear down the Iranian people even more. This would lead to their ultimate plan of
mhm, mhm.
fracturing and breaking apart Iran. But
Yes.
could the United States pull it off? It is doubtful, according to our military.
Uh, if I may ask you, I have two questions and they are both important. Now, Hezbollah and the Houthis sat out the last round of strikes. If the US goes for regime change this time, do you expect a total regional wildfire or are those proxies too degraded to respond? That's one question. Another question was suggestions that Israel would strike first, and how will that really be, or how will that respond from the allies also?
Okay, so first with respect to Hezbollah, Ansar Allah, second with respect to the probability of Israel strikes, we know that Iranian proxies, their allies, have been strategically weakened. We've seen over the past year repeated American strikes on Yemen, Israeli strikes on Yemen, on Syria, on southern Lebanon, on Gaza. We do see that last spring the United States was bested by Ansar Allah after a couple of months after we lost three F-18 Super Hornet fighter jets. Two fell overboard. We lost one in flight. We spent $2 billion in 2 months while our
Mm,
government is saying that Americans cannot afford food stamps, we cannot afford welfare for our own poor
yes.
people, yet we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars a day on our massive armada. Yet we did see we have, along with Israel primarily has
Mm.
weakened. Certainly Hamas, Hezbollah
Briefly,
appears to just, but last year, everyone was waiting to see. Last June, everyone was waiting to see. Everyone thought, what is going to happen when the United States runs out of air defense missiles?
mm,
What will happen to Israel? Then boom, Trump moved in, bold, swift, decisive action. There's going to be a ceasefire. I'm going to call it the 12-day war. Boom, over, done with, gone. Um, but this left Israel frustrated, which leads to your second question, the probability of an Israel strike. Yes, they want to strike. We are now hearing rumors the last couple of days. If Trump does not do something soon, if he does not strike, Israel will take it upon themselves to strike
mm,
because they know that will drag in the United States. We
yes.
hear Trump is now considering if Israel strikes and Iran is provoked to strike American bases, American personnel in the Middle East, that will give him a reason to go in.
Yes.
That will
And
galvanize the American people who are so opposed to this, that this will give Trump a reason to go
yes,
in.
Ms.
It is
Chapman.
doubtful this will work.
Yes, unfortunately, my time is out. I have to end it here. But Ms. Chapman, we thank you so much. And we do appreciate you joining us today. And whether it's a crow-sized dinosaur in Patagonia or a 1.5% enrichment cap in Geneva, the smallest details often determine the survival of the species. As technical talks move to Vienna next week, we are reminded that in international relations, the art of the deal often relies on the physics of the strike. Many thanks for watching In Focus. I'm Mana Musalhi, and see you next week.